I came in and said, oh, good.
Looking at this clock.
Yeah. I know.
All right, at 6 p.m. we're calling the meeting to order. First order of business is confirming a quorum. We have in person Penny Benelli, Dana Galnitsky, Ann Henshaw, Caitlin Miller, Mike Ripley, Jerry Usey, and myself, Donovan Nichols. Do we have anyone on the line?
I do not see a board member.
So that is a quorum of 6. The review and approval of agenda. If there are any additions or deletions, we'll be looking for a motion to approve it.
So moved.
Second.
Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The motion passes. And then so I get presentation of the proposed school budget. Lane.
You guys went so fast that the computer can't catch up. There we go. All right, and this is especially there are a couple of folks online. If there are questions as we're talking about things here, just speak up because we're not going to be able to see you while the presentation is up on the board. And it's important as we go through, if there's questions from anyone, just don't be afraid to interrupt. Because the purpose of this meeting is to get as much information out about the budget that's going up for revote on May 12th as possible. To start, a little bit of perspective, kind of where I always begin the conversation here, is about the idea about how much local control that we actually have over what people's tax rates are. Your taxes, while what we do locally has a very small impact on what your tax rates are, your taxes are really based upon the total spending of education in the state of Vermont. All the districts around the state, they vote in their budgets. That amount goes to the state adds that up. They get a total dollar amount. They subtract off whatever revenues that they're going to use. It's usually like taxes on meals and hotels and things like that. So they subtract some money out of there that's already covered. And then the remainder is split up amongst all the taxpayers in the state. So in the old days before Act 60, when you were voting on a school budget, your taxes were paying for your school. In the current state of affairs right now, you are paying for the education of everyone across the state of Vermont when you're paying your taxes. Now, just to do a little kind of basic logic math here. So this is intended to give a magnitude, a feeling of the magnitude of things. Cost of education, right? Education fund in Vermont's about $2.7 billion. That's what the taxpayers are paying for, and that's what your tax rates are based upon. GM budget this current year, 2025-26 is 18.6 million. So we're about 0.7% of the overall cost of education in Vermont. And so to put things in perspective, 99.3% of what happens in terms of determining your tax rate is out of your control.
Lane, how do we estimate what our taxes will be if that's the case?
So I'm gonna show you that, and if Cheryl wants to explain the formula to you,
Okay.
and you want that math lesson, you're more than welcome to.
I don't know if I can, but
I used to, when I first got back to Vermont, I actually would spend a couple of hours every year kind of reviewing the math, and it does make sense, but it takes some time.
yeah, just like the predictive nature of it.
Yeah. So level service budget is what the district is shooting for with this revote on May 12th. And so what that means is we're trying to provide the same programs and services next year as we are this year. We are not asking for additions to programs or staff. We're not asking for cuts. We're just trying to keep things steady state. Unfortunately, with contractual obligations and because of inflation from year to year, there is a cost increase just to keep things level service. Level service budget that we are asking the voters for on May 12th is 19.3 million. The current budget that we are existing within this current school year is 18.6 million. So it's an increase of 3.8% or $714,000. The bullets there are where most of that increase is coming from. Special education, we actually don't have a lot of new students that are costing the district a lot of money this year. What is happening is the cost of providing the services from the providers has gone up. So special education is the biggest cost increase in terms of driving that 714,000. You also have a subsidy cliff that you're dealing with. So in other words, last year you had one-time money that was applied towards this year to subsidize people's taxes. You don't have that money this year, right? It was a one-time thing. So you used your coupon, you don't have it. So to keep operations at the same level with that loss, we've got to make up that subsidy cliff. And I worry about what's going to happen with the state because, you know, they put anywhere in the last couple of years between 50 and 100 million towards subsidizing the education fund. And so at some point in time, if they don't have the money to do that, there's going to be a cliff that we're all going to have to manage. Year to year, right, based on the contracts with staff in the district, salaries go up. So that's another source of the increase. The cost of benefits, especially health insurance, actually wasn't quite as bad this year as it's been in previous years, but it's usually a double-digit increase. So that's an expense. And then food services. Food has gotten more expensive. And so instead of paying about $30,000 a year to subsidize the meals within the district, we're up to about $111,000. And so this is where these increases are coming from. And again, we're not changing anything, we're not adding anything, we're just trying to keep ourselves where we are currently. Questions on any of the parts and pieces?
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
Not following how the local tax money goes to the state. And then the state says, okay, sending it back out to you. Wouldn't that then mean the state is saying, here's your service budget?
So there's an argument that I have, and it may help kind of answer the question. So in the state of Vermont, after Act 60, so what Act 60 said was, hey, we've got districts around the state of Vermont that do not, the towns just don't have the wealth of somebody like an Essex Junction when IBM was there at the time. And that's inequitable, that's unfair. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a system where we kind of redistribute wealth so that there's equality across the districts. And the way that they did that is your local control changed where you're voting on your school budget, but your effect on your local taxes is very minimal. Your local control is voting what your school budget is. That in our case, you know, this current year, it's 18.6 million. What happens when districts, the 52 districts all across the state, they vote on their budgets? When the budgets pass, those dollar amounts go to the state. It adds up the total cost for all those districts. That gets divided equally through equalization formulas amongst all the taxpayers in the state of Vermont. So when you're paying your taxes, you are paying for the education of all the students across the state. In the old days, what used to happen was when you voted on the school budget, the money that you were voting on came directly from you as the taxpayer. So you had a
Nuanced.
yeah, it's complicated. There was a point to it, and that was to ensure that equality. But it's one of the reasons.
But you're still saying we only want this to be our budget locally.
Yeah, and so that the issue becomes is that you can add a lot to your budget as long as you don't go over what they call the excess spending threshold, and you can take a lot away from it. The change in your tax rates is minimal because of that, right? Because if we increase our budget, everybody across the state of Vermont is helping us pay for that increase. If we decrease our budget, we don't see much locally because everybody across the state is benefiting from that decrease that we did.
Yeah.
So it gets very diluted.
Yeah. I'll save my other question.
Oh, that's okay. This is good stuff. And again, they've set up a system that's incredibly complicated.
Let's wait.
Yeah.
Just say something. If we get a question, could you repeat it? Because your voice is
Oh,
louder than
yeah.
for anybody.
Yeah, no, the question was around kind of what we were talking about, the impact that we can or cannot have on our local taxes based upon how we change our local school budget. Yeah, then the point, you're gonna see it in the tax rate numbers that I put up in a minute, you're gonna see, how much we really can affect things. I'm gonna show you.
Yeah, well, it's not even so much about like what our tax rate is, but like, it seems like if the state is just like it's negligible.
Hmm.
No matter what you.
Yeah, as long as you don't go over the excess spending threshold.
I want to ask my other question.
Yeah.
It's how, so how do referenda play into that? If somebody locally, like if a local area wants to have a referendum about something specific.
In terms of adding something or removing the budget?
So if you have a community with means and it wants the fancy new schools.
So what they do, again, the idea, so the question is what happens if a district wants to spend more?
Yeah.
Right? And so what the state has said is because all the taxpayers across the state are contributing to all the schools in terms of the resources that it has, it's not fair for one district to seriously outspend another. And they control that by what's called an excess spending threshold. So it's related to how much you're spending per student. And I think this year it's about 16,400 if I recall. So as long as a district, when it puts its budget together, is spending less than $16,400 per student, right? They make it complicated. You're okay, there's no penalties, you're fine, the system works just the way we described it. If, however, you decide you want to spend more and you push things over that excess spending threshold, now you get a penalty. Because they're saying, hey, that's not fair to the other districts because everybody else is paying for this and you're spending an extreme of what things should cost. And so the penalty is like this. So if I decide that I want $1 million more and it's putting me over the excess spending threshold, then I got to pay $2 million to get it. And that comes directly from local taxpayers. That does not come from the other people in the state.
Got it.
So anything above that excess spending threshold comes straight from here and you pay a double penalty on it. You got to pay for it twice.
So the penalty and the overage comes just from that
Just what's above the excess spending.
and the penalties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some good questions. Now your hand. So school tax rates. And so what we're looking at is we're looking at the level service budget. Again, just maintaining what we're currently doing. And we're comparing those tax rates to what we're paying right now in this current school year that we're in. And so to talk a little bit about what this means, I'm going to use Baltimore, right? Because it's a nice low number. So hopefully it makes people feel a little warm and fuzzy and happier about things. So what these tax rates mean is they're based upon $100 of assessed value. So if my property were worth $100, the taxes I would pay in Baltimore would be $1.28, right? If my property were worth $200, it would be worth, I would have to pay twice this amount, right? If my property were worth $1,000, there's 10 sets of 100 and 1,000, so it would be 10 times this. So I would pay $12.80 for my property taxes. So they're based upon $100 of assessed value of your home. And so what would happen, and we're going to leave Andover out of this for a minute because they're golden right now because they reassessed. In Baltimore, if we go with a level service budget for next year, they're currently paying $1.28 per $100 of assessed value. They would go to $1.39, an 11-cent increase. What does that translate to? I'll show you on the next page in terms of the average homeowner. But what's interesting, and one of the things that we're going to talk about, is of that 11-cent increase for Baltimore, 5 cents is due to the increased cost of education across the state, right? Cost of education goes up because of inflation, even if people are trying to keep things level service. 5 cents of it is due to the changes in the cost of education across the state. 6 cents of it is due to changes in local property values. And this is the piece that people get a little confused about, and we'll talk about common level of appraisal and what it means. But if you take a look at Cavendish and Chester, Cavendish is looking at a huge tax increase, right? 34 cents. Only 5 cents of it is due to what's happening in education. 29 cents of it is due to changes in local property values. Right. So the state has kind of conglomerated two things in together, one which we have a little bit of control over. That's what the state is spending on education, and one we have no control over, how your property values change from year to year. Luke?
Sorry, I'm new to Vermont.
No,
Who
this-
assesses, who's responsible for the?
So you got, I got a slide for that. Okay, give it a second to switch over here. All right. So you have a local assessment. The town goes out and it assesses your property. They do that occasionally. I don't know when the last time Chester was done. It's probably been quite a while.
10 years ago.
So you have a local assessment. That local assessment is used to pay your municipal taxes, right? You pay town taxes too. We're talking school taxes. The problem is with school taxes is the state doesn't want you paying that assessed value that the town has come up with. They want you paying taxes on the fair market value of your property each and every year. And so they do a survey every year and they go out and they take a look in each town at what houses are selling for. And they use that to decide what the total value of the town is, right? If this is what it's assessed at. Is it really the fair market value here, or is the fair market value down here? Now, in most cases, because the towns have not reassessed recently, and actually they're kind of hindered in doing that because I think there's only 2 or 3 assessors in the state of Vermont.
Yeah, that's the delay.
That's the delay. You end up in a situation like Mount Holly here. So, all right, common level of appraisal. It's basically a little mathematical adjustment. It adjusts the town's assessed property value to fair market value because the state wants to make sure you're paying property taxes on the current market value of your home, what it's worth this year. Not what the town assessed it at 10 years ago, but what it's worth this year. So they put a little number there. So they'll say, oh, the CLA in Mount Holly is 56%. What that means is that you're only paying taxes in Mount Holly on 56% of what your property is worth. And the state says, no, we expect you to pay on 100% of it. So we're going to adjust your tax rates. We're going to increase them to make sure that you're paying taxes on that other 44%. Right? Nice and easy and simple. Yeah.
That's a real challenge for those of us who live in Cavendish, because when COVID hit,
Yeah.
a lot of second homeowners, now I think we're about, Mike, you can help me with this, 50-50 with the homeowners who have children that grew up there and want to live there now that they're adults. So to pay this fair market value is becoming almost not impossible, but very challenging for those of us who live and work here.
Yeah.
So I don't even know what to say. Like, how do
That's
we deal with this?
this is, you have no control over this unless the state changes how they calculate property taxes. This is a legislative change that would have to happen. Nothing will change. Now, to make matters more complicated, if this makes a little bit of sense, we're talking about this in terms of your property. What the state really does is it looks at the total value of all the properties in a town when it does this assessment. It kind of means the same thing when we talk about your property, but there's a nuance here, right? If they're taking a look at what the average value of the properties in a town are, some properties are high, some properties are low, right? Some properties have increased in value over the last 10 years, some have stayed the same, and some in the town have gone down. The problem is because they're doing the calculation at a town level, if enough properties went up, the tax rates are going to go up, even though your property or someone else's property value may have actually gone down. And in today's day and age with computers, they should not have to do that. They should be able to calculate everybody's house and property individually and be able to tell you, what your tax rate is based upon that. But there's an issue. This happens a lot in Mount Holly and Ludlow because they have that situation. They have 30% of the houses in there, the properties, the values are going through the roof, while the rest are staying the same or going down a little bit. Yet these people are being impacted because this $1 million home is now worth $3 million. And their, $385,000 home is still worth 385,000, but their tax rates are going to go up. So it's a interesting kind of system. But the important piece of this is, and this has been kind of since COVID, the biggest thing that's impacting taxes for like the last 5 years since COVID, it's been changes in CLA. In Vermont, people were fleeing the cities like Boston and New York. You were getting a lot of remote workers that were coming here. So the property value started to increase. And so anywhere between 50 and probably 85 or 90% of the tax increases that you have been through in the last couple of years have been due to changes in property values, not due to what's happening in terms of districts across the state of Vermont. So again, it doesn't make paying that gigantic tax bill feel any better. But I think it's really important for people to understand that there is a very limited control that we have.
Can I just add?
Yep.
In theory, once you're reassessed and at 100%, the tax rate.
It never works that way.
I said in theory.
Yeah, theory, yeah.
Your tax rate, the tax rate will come down, but your property value is gonna come up, so you should be paying the same amount of money. It just is more palatable to have a lower tax rate.
Doesn't look like that when I see my bill.
And
Like Andover's is going down because they just did a reassessment, so their houses are all valued so much more now that.
right, so they go with the
If
high
they need to collect
percentage.
$1 million and everybody's houses goes up 10%, their taxes have to go down because they only did $1 million.
So supposedly, yeah, the taxes supposedly you're supposed to stay the same from year to year. So as the value of your home increases, supposedly your tax rate is supposed to go down to compensate for it. Right? They do this balancing act with the CLA, but for some reason it never seems to work that way.
It just never balances. It's weird.
And is that for
Well, it doesn't
specifically
state.
education, or is that for like whatever you pay?
So you got your two taxes, municipal is town.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to confuse this with the town because ours is usually the more horrendous one that people deal with. This is just for school tax.
Okay.
Just to put it in terms of percentages, to try to make this a little bit clearer. In terms of the changes, if we have a level service budget, and it gets voted in, these are the percentages of where the tax increase will come from. So in Baltimore, it would be that 11-cent increase. It would be about a 50-50 split, right? 5 cents, 6 cents. But if you look at Cavendish and Chester, only about 15% of the tax increase is coming because of changes in the cost of education around the state of Vermont. 85-ish, 83% of it is coming because of changes in the property values. And again, so the state kind of hides that CLA piece a little bit. They have different ways that politically they try to hide things to control the cost of education. CLA is one of the ways they do it. They did, what was it called, the statewide adjustment last year.
Yeah, I can show that later.
Yeah, where they tried to make it so that we couldn't figure out what percentage of this was coming from CLA. There was no reason to make that change other than the hide stuff. So this is what it means, and it's a lot. So to put things in easier perspective, if we go with a level service budget, this is what you're looking at. For every $100,000 of property value, if you live in Baltimore, your taxes are going to go up by $110. So if you have a $300,000 property, you're looking at $330 in your annual taxes in terms of an increase. How much of it is coming from changes in education spending across the state? $50 per 100,000. 60 is coming from changes due to property values. Cavendish, $340 per 100,000 in property value. 50 of it is due to education costs. 290 of it is due to changes in property value, right? And then you see Chester there. Andover is doing well. Green means that's what they're getting back per 100,000 because they were reassessed. So questions on this? What I'm going to do is I'm going to compare this to what the changes per $100,000 would be if we kept the budget the same from this year to next and didn't do any increase.
Can I
You
ask
would, yeah.
The green 860 for Andover.
Hmm?
So that the green is what they get back per 100,000.
They're gonna get $810 back per 100,000. They saw an increase of $50 in it.
Wouldn't that go the other way?
Well, think about what it means. You got two opposite numbers. They saw an increase of 50 and a decrease of 860. When you put those two together, you get, yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, because their taxes are still going up by that
I
$50
just-
per 100,000
yeah.
as well.
Got it.
Good question.
So the change was actually 860
Yeah, but because
and 50 of that was,
an increase due to the,
so isn't it
Wouldn't it be
The other
an
way around.
increase of
60?
no, a reduction of 810 and an increase of 50, which gives you a
Seven.
reduction of 7. What is
60.
it?
so it's
It's got a
you're,
negative and a positive. You're gonna net them together.
It's the
Yeah.
other way around.
you're gaining, you're gaining 860 due to the change in the CLA. You're taking $50 off that because you're paying a little bit higher taxes for.
Which results in the
So
change.
you end
rate.
up with a.
Yeah.
But
Got
good
it.
questions. I had to think through it too, and I think I screwed it up on the first round that we did this way back in January. When I
Yeah,
I
so
did
this
that
is the
one.
total change.
Yeah.
CLA plus education costs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And then, yeah, okay.
You got it. So the first column is the
Yeah.
total and the other two are the breakdown. Yeah.
We just mentioned that this looks like such a wonderful thing for Andover. But what, 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, just before they reappraised, it looked the opposite.
Yeah.
Poor Andover
Yeah.
was so out of whack with current property values that they were getting hammered at a much higher degree than the other towns. So this is just a little bit of catch up.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's right, we talk about that equality piece that they try to build in there. Typically, kind of what I've seen is when they reassess, the next year after they reassess, taxes go up, and then the year after that, they drop. Kind of what you're seeing here. So, just as a comparison, this is to kind of show our level of control. If we didn't increase the cost. So in other words, if we're spending next year, if we're asking the taxpayers to pay next year exactly what they're paying this year, so there's no change in terms of costs, right? It means the district is going to be losing things because the cost of things go up, right? But if we kept the budget the same from this year to next year, this is what your tax rates would be. And we'll talk a little bit about this. To get to no increase, we lose about 9 staff members, probably a little bit more. We lose a little bit of programming. What you would see happen is taxes per 100,000 in Baltimore, right? You're still paying $50 more per 100,000. In Cavendish, you're still paying $250 more per 100,000. In Chester, you're paying $190 more per 100,000. So this is the tax rate if it's level service, what we're asking for. This is what it would be if we kept things exactly the same. So you would save in Baltimore about 6 cents overall on your tax rate. 9 cents in Cavendish, 7 cents in Chester. So again, there's a difference there, but it's not as much as you'd hope, right? If I thought I could cut your taxes in half and not destroy the schools, I'd be working with you. Pretty hard, but
Is that including the increases that we had this year with the above and beyond with special ed and food and all the other stuff?
so this is if the budget that we would be asking for would be exactly the same as what we're spending this year.
But typically, they probably would go up in cost from
What we
they-
budgeted last year, not what we spent.
Yeah.
It would be what we budgeted for this year, not what no, last year, this year, not what we spent. We don't have that information yet.
Yeah.
Isn't there,
Well, I don't want to go there. Go ahead.
maybe you're gonna get into this later, but isn't there something would help people who are reasonable? I'll let you get into it.
Yeah, no, you kind of have to declare it anyway when you did your taxes.
Right.
So there's the homestead declaration. So basically, if your household income is 115,000 or less, and household income is complicated, it doesn't mean you as the taxpayer's income. It means everybody that's living in your house, what the total income is. If it's $115,000 or less, you do your homestead declaration when you do your taxes. And what that will do is it can reduce your school taxes by up to $5,600. And it can reduce your town taxes by somewhere around $2,400. It's a sliding scale. So the lower your household income is below that 115,000, the more they'll cut off your taxes in terms of what you're gonna have to pay. If that makes sense. Yeah. But it's kind of an automatic process in Vermont when you're filling out the state tax forms, they require you to do.
You have to be a resident for a year.
Yeah, you get a resident for a year. Yep. So good. But other than that, there's not much more of a story to tell unless there's questions on anything.
Feeling you want to see the breakdown of the calculation?
No.
If you want.
Well, no, it's.
Cheryl's got a smart board in her office. She can take her through it. Okay.
Does it matter how many school budgets have passed so far? Because if we're talking about one big number in the end, how do we know?
Because we have to submit our budgets within, well, by June first is when I want them. This one won't go in June first because that wait 30 days after it passes. And it will pass, right?
Yes.
To submit it, but then they take all that information and they calculate what that.
So how do they come up with the estimate, I guess is what I'm asking.
So that's done by the department, the tax department. They do the calculations. They look at what the grand lists are, what the anticipated revenues are for the things that are going to offset that, what money is going to be contributed.
They survey the school districts to try to figure out what they think they're going to be asking for a budget.
Okay, I guess that's what I'm asking. So it's based on kind of what budgets are out for.
What people are
You
planning.
know, unfortunately,
So
asked
that's
us
like
in
the worst,
November,
not the worst
and
case scenario,
We're
the
just
highest
in the
number.
beginning stages of that.
Okay.
so it's
Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank
Yeah,
you.
but your calculations last year, back and look, I think your calculations were within
No,
like a 10th
once we
percent.
said that.
Yeah.
Not the December first letter.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, we don't even know yet if the governor, if the legislature is gonna actually do a subsidy at this point in
Right.
time, or
Right.
how much it's gonna be.
Right.
And we
So
don't know
these
what
are
the
based
deal's
on like the
gonna be.
highest budget, like.
These are based on what we know
won't be
right
more
now.
than this. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And the CLA and the yield has not been decided yet. And so that could change, yeah, kind of like it.
Simple, right?
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm still a little confused because this is not my forte. So when people vote no on our local budget, if they vote no, they might be saying no to the way they deal with things around the state rather than just our Green Mountain budget.
That's what they're doing.
And then we end up having no control over our budget, right?
Right.
This is
Because-
what,
They're saying, no, we don't like the way this is, but even if you said, I'm gonna cut 9 jobs, they still might say no.
I'm gonna cut
because-
9 jobs and I'm gonna save you $50 on your taxes annually by doing it. Yeah.
Right, so,
needs to happen on the state.
so this is what Jerry has said in the past, and the former member Scott Kendall said, if you have a problem with this.
Yeah.
Don't yell at the board or Elaine or Cheryl,
right,
call your state reps.
yeah,
Like, this is a state thing, it's not in our control.
And let your neighbors know as well,
yeah,
because one of the things that happens in Montpelier is schools are demonized. That were the reasons that it's costing so much, but you can see in reality, very, very little of the tax impact is due to the schools.
I can give you a really good example if I can state it clearly. When I went up and I testified on Act 73, which is what the state is trying to do to control the cost of education, which probably is not going to control the cost of education. I made the comment in front of the House Education Committee chair that, this is going to require, cuts in staff. And he looked at me and he said, we're not requiring cuts to staff. And I looked back at him and I said, yes, I've done the calculations. Your enrollment requirements that are a part of Act 73 are going to require at least a cut of 1,400 teachers. So again, they do not want to own it. And so the odds of the legislature changing anything is very slim until they feel that they're going to get more votes by changing things than by not. Nothing's going to happen. And right now, the way that they're approaching things in terms of, potential forced consolidations and closures and enrollment requirements, has a very negative feel to people. So they know the backlash that's going to come from it, and so they're backing off of any meaningful change. So again, until things get bad enough that they think they're going to get more votes by changing stuff, it's not going to change. So that's why people have got to get their voices heard. But
Thank you.
no, you're not asleep. That's good.
No.
We have a question on this.
I don't see anything.
Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Here's a hand up.
Good evening.
Hi.
Can you people hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
My name is Steve Mancuso. I'm a Chester resident, and maybe some of you guys could answer a question I have, which is, if we have a decline in the student population, why do we need the same number of teachers?
Mr. Mancuso, there's a mandate in the country as well as the state of you need to be certified to teach certain students. So if I'm a science teacher, I can't teach math or English. I can only teach science, and it's also represented by grade. So I can't teach middle school or elementary. I can only teach high school. So depending on what you have, you need so many teachers to teach science in high school, so many to teach science in middle school. You need so many English teachers, and the English teachers can't teach history and math unless they have the certification, which means they went to school almost twice as long to get that. So we're kind of stuck because of what the state and the federal government set up years ago.
The piece that I can add, as well, in coming from Massachusetts, high school of 14 to 1,600 kids. I had 2 students that were on IEPs for emotional disturbance. I had probably maybe 10% were on an IEP for a minimal academic IEP. In the state of Vermont, and I'm going to express my own opinion here, and I don't expect anybody to agree with it. The lack of standards from the Agency of Education, the lack of guidance, right? Peter Senge's idea of every system produces exactly what it's designed to produce, even if that design is unintentional, is working its way through Vermont. The performance of students in the state aren't because the teachers are failing. It's because the state hasn't been explicit on what it expects people to learn, and they got slapped by the federal government not too long ago. And it's one of the reasons they're scrambling around looking at doing a gigantic study on special education in the state of Vermont and recommendations on how to fix it, as well as having to put graduation requirements in place. So one of the reasons in Vermont why there is such a low student to teacher ratio is because of the increased need that students have that does not exist in other states. It would be very difficult, coming from Massachusetts, 23 kids in a classroom was the norm, but they're different kids. And I don't mean that as being derogatory at all. They are different kids. I cannot imagine 18 to 23 students in some of the classes here in Vermont with the needs that they have. And the in a lot of ways, the lack of preparation because of the lack of the standards that the state has.
Yep. And I'd like to second what Mike said as well. I used to teach high school earth science. I could never have taught high school history. When you get certified, you are certified in that subject, means you really know what you're talking about, and you're certified in how to teach that to students. And you can't just switch people around, say, you teach algebra, now you're going to teach history, and then you're going to teach science. If you have all those subjects, you have to have teachers certified in them, and you cannot just simply juggle teachers.
Yep.
They're very good requirements.
And even with the smaller schools, which we don't quite have, and I'm talking elementary schools with 20 kids, and they are existent and around the state of Vermont. There is a skeleton crew of staff that you have to have, even though having them exceeds the needs of the students. Because by law, you have to have them. And so, that's kind of the conundrum that we're
Do you
in.
mean teaching staff or support staff?
Teaching staff, support staff, special education, certain number of hours of guidance, administration, are required by rank.
Can you talk about the per pupil increase and why it's so much more than the budget in the, is it because of the weighting or?
Want to see?
What?
Want to see my sheet now?
I don't see that. But is it all because there's lower enrollment, but does it also have to do with changes in the weighting?
Not changes in the weighting, but changes in the qualifications that the students had. There was a big, coming out of COVID, a lot of people qualified for free and reduced lunch and, state subsidies and whatnot. And they upped those thresholds, and then a lot of people didn't qualify. So we had like a 30 pupil weighted count drop.
It was like a $500,000 cut, if I recall. So again, the weighting for the free and reduced students got us this much extra money. They changed the threshold for students to qualify. Fewer students qualified, so the amount of money we got for that weighting dropped, and it was significant.
So if you look
That
at
was last year.
line 11, which is our long-term rated membership, last year we were at 1,184. And this year we've dropped to 1,154.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Steve, did we touch at least a little bit on the things that you're interested in?
Oh, yes, you did, Lane. Can I ask another question here?
Sure.
Maybe you can unfuzz me. You seem to be up on 73. And on one hand, we're saying that, the state requires certified teachers here, and, which I understand. On the other hand, 73 is requiring cuts, and those cuts are going to come regardless of how we vote.
If the legislature changes nothing, right now, at least unless somebody's heard something I haven't, the last 3 weeks, there has been no motion in terms of consolidating districts. There are still provisions of the law that are in place, like the minimum enrollments. Those are part of the law right now, but the question is will they follow through on it? They are the law. So, we are gearing up so that when we go into the budget planning season in the fall, that we are taking that into consideration. But I couldn't tell you what the legislature is going to do. They could do 180. They could leave things the way that they are. It's completely unclear. And the certification piece is critically important. That's that you touched on. That's actually at the federal level. Teachers have to be highly qualified. They have to have that certification for us to be able to employ them. Yeah. So good.
Thank you.
Not sure if I touched on all the parts and pieces, but it's unclear what's going to come out of Act 73. There are pieces, like I said, that are law right now, so we have to plan for them, but whether they stay or not, who knows?
Thank you, Lane.
Yeah. Good. Thank you for the questions. Oh, well, the other thing that happened this year, in terms of the average weighted membership, so that's the number of students that we're considered to have that we get funding from the state for, is their numbers didn't match anybody else's. There was a lot of hubbub around the state's inaccuracies, and the state did admit that in a lot of its data collections, the way that they have been running forward with those numbers, the numbers weren't correct. So the state has a lot of work to do to get its act together. And I'm not blaming the AOE. There are some incredibly hard workers there. Some of the best people I've ever interacted with and the most knowledgeable are there. They are just underfunded and understaffed. The Ludlow Mount Holly is a perfect example. They were, as they're doing their restructuring conversations, they wanted to take a look at things like, how much are we spending per pupil in terms of special education costs compared to other districts. That's data the state is supposed to have and is supposed to be published. When I went looking for it, on their dashboard, the last time they published it was 2021. So they're getting slammed by the federal government too for not keeping up on their data and reporting requirements.
Well, the Department of Education has been shedding staff and shoving their jobs onto the local districts too, which is.
Oh, yeah.
making things worse.
And of course, IDA has never actually been fully funded. So, yeah. I think they're what, 13% or 15%?
Oh, gosh, they will.
We're supposed to be 40, we're at 30.
Yeah, and they were talking about, I don't know if they actually did it. When they were having discussions at the federal level, the IDEA was going to be frozen. They were going to get rid of Title II, and they were going to freeze it. Which Title II, we got our allocation for next year, so who knows? Are there anybody online with questions we can confuse you with? So tomorrow, a lot of what we discussed, I summarize, I put in writing, and I try to start getting that out to the community through a variety of means. For the folks here, when you receive that, the thing that we're kind of asking is that, if you've got a social media presence, if you're willing, if you can piggyback that. That seems to be the best way to get the information around to as many people as possible. And then May 12th is the vote. You want to talk a little bit about Saturday?
Can we?
Yeah,
Okay.
just invite people.
Yes, so there will be several of us. Caitlin will actually be we're hosting a conversation.
We're not doing that, y'all.
We're having a conversation at Chester Town Hall at 11:30 on Saturday, where people can come and ask questions, and we can dive deeper into some of the things we discussed tonight, and just kind of a chance to help people understand and make it as accessible as possible, because we want people to feel like they're understanding and being able to access this information.
And also talking about where to go to vote, what it's like when you go to vote, if you've never voted before, answering questions.
We should talk about that percentage increase. Per people.
Yeah, go ahead. Because that was a good question. So one of the question that you had about the per pupil increase, why is that a higher percentage than the overall budget increase? Overall budget increase is 3.82%. The state purposely requires us to use that student number because they know it's going to be higher.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say the state manipulates things to try to control the cost of education, they use that number specifically because they know that's going to be the highest percentage increase out of everything that we generate. But I'll let you kind of talk about why that is.
So I have two columns. The two green columns are the same calculation. One is how the state wants us to calculate it, to make the CLA not the bad guy. And I go back to the old method because it's tried and true. So we start with our budget, the 19,341,000. We take out local revenues. So it's tuition we get, interest we get, the ELL grant that we get. Everything after that, we have to raise by taxes because we don't have that money. Then we take our long-term weighted membership, which we've talked about that and what the different weights mean, and that 1154, and then we get our cost per pupil.
Mm-hmm.
Then we divide our cost per pupil by the yield. So the way the state presents it is that 8,844, which is on line 15 of column J. That's the yield that they present. I divide it back by the 7033, which is the state average CLA, get the larger number there. But as you go down through, you'll see that we come up with the same number. So that $1.27.6, that's where our 5-cent increase comes over last year. But when you do it the state's way, that comes to $1.85.
Because of the CLA.
Because of the CLA adjustment prior to this. But then when you get down to the bottom, the 21, 22, 23, 24 of all the towns, if you look in both columns, that's identical.
So if I'm reading what you're saying correctly, the inclusion of the CLA in the per pupil calculation is what causes the major difference.
In the tax rate.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So going back to the point I brought up.
Which we don't have control over, it has nothing to do with education.
So up in column G, column H, line 5, I think it is, it's the overall budget is a 3.853 increase. The cost per pupil increase because of our decline in long-term weighted membership has gone up 9.98%. So when voters read that ballot, that it says at the end, it gives a full amount of the budget, then it gives our cost per pupil and that dollar amount increase. And like Lane said, it's really there just
Just
mess with
Just to
everybody.
have people vote no.
Yeah.
I mean, that language that we
Serves
use in
no
those
purpose.
warnings is set by statute. We don't have a choice.
And there's no purpose to that.
Yeah.
From what I can tell.
How many students at GM right now, 7 through 12?
Like,
So a little under 300.
Under 300.
Just a little under.
Just a little.
yeah.
98 is the last figure I don't know whether that's accurate right now, but.
It's probably a little lower than that. My guess is it's probably around 275, 278.
And how many in the district? How many students in the school district?
A little under 900. So 80-ish.
Okay.
I actually have if I can find it, I actually have the numbers.
District or the issue?
Well, I don't.
Oh, yeah, I'm thinking Tierra, I'm thinking
You're
Logan
thinking,
Holly
yeah,
and
you're thinking issue.
Green Mountain when you say district. Sorry about that.
Cavendish,
So you're talking
Chester,
Cavendish, Chester,
Andover.
and here. Be roughly the same, roughly double.
Double
Because there's
278.
6 grades here, 6 grades between those two schools.
Yeah.
You're all gonna end up picking roughly.
Yeah.
Probably a little less than double, but
I got 600.
if you include Ludlow and Mount Holly and stuff, that's where he gets the 880.
Okay.
This is Pam O'Neill. I just asked our registrar. Green Mountain actually has 313 students on our
And actually,
enrollment.
Thanks, Van.
I got my new number. So it was 298, 2023, 310 last year, 315 now. So Green Mountain, at least in recent years, has been going up a little bit.
Thank you, Pam.
Yeah,
Yep, you're welcome.
it took me a while to pull it. So it actually has been increasing a little bit. So 315.
Thank you.
Other?
For all the reasons you were talking about before, a difference between 290 and 315 doesn't mean you have to hire 2 more teachers. And when you go from 315 to 298, it doesn't mean you can get rid of 2 teachers because of the way things are distributed. Maybe that will be true if all 15 of the increase were the same grade from the same, but it's never that way. It's always.
That's helpful information.
Yeah, so I think we're moving to adjourn.
Move. Seconded.
All in favor?
All right.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
653.
Thank you.
Are the 2 of you, do you want me there or on Saturday? I don't want to overshadow stuff or. I'm there, I'm happy to sit in the audience, so if there's a question.